Welcome back to Kadence Amplify. I'm Hannah. For anyone who doesn't know me, I've been around with Kadence for over a decade now. So I feel like I probably know a lot of you, but to any who are new to the Kadence community, so glad you're here. This is like my favorite event of the year. And it's already been such an amazing day. We've heard from some incredible speakers, and we're not even halfway through. So exciting. Thanks for being here. It's so fun to see so many of you in the chat. It's just such a blast. And I have so many more speakers that I get to introduce because the day is really just getting started. So next up, we have Jeffrey Costa, and he'll be speaking to us about using Kadence for web performance. So super excited for this session. A bit about Jeffrey before I bring him on. He is currently a senior product manager on the MongoDB Atlas security team. He brings 12 years of experience to B2B SaaS, specializing in delivering high-value products and generating new business. Previously at Kame, I think I'm saying that right, Technologies, he launched successful products and API gateway. He launched successful products that significantly boosted annual recurrence revenue, including a distributed key value store and API gateway. He holds an MBA from the University of Dayton and certifications including CISSP and AWS Cloud Practitioner. His technical expertise spans CDN, web performance, APIs, and database security. In the WordPress ecosystem, he architects robust solutions focusing on performance optimization and enhanced security measures for enterprise-scale deployments. So let's bring him on. Hi, Jeffrey. How are you?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, it's a little nerve-wracking. I was thinking the same. I was like, can people hear me?
Thanks for the fantastic introduction.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. I just met you yesterday, but I'm excited to get to know you more and hear your presentation. And
fantastic. And I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen, make sure that's working. Hopefully you'll be able.
Looks like we've got it back there. So I'll go ahead and add your screen. I'll remove myself. If you have questions for me, I'll be here. But we'll plan to save some questions for the end. But yeah, let me know if you need anything, and I'll let you take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks, Hannah. Appreciate it. All right. So let's slideshow this and get started. So by way of introduction, I think Hannah did a great job right there. I am Jeff Costa. I am a product manager. I spent a good portion of my career with a company called Akamai, who you may know. If you know Cloudflare, Akamai is a little bit larger than Cloudflare, but does the same thing. And I also have a WordPress consultancy as well. I've been using WordPress for 15 years. I actually loaded up my backup of my first WordPress blog and looked at the WP users table, and here's my first admin login going back to 2008. So I've been doing this a while. And today we're going to be talking about web performance, and specifically this is the agenda for the day. We're going to talk about the value of web performance. We're going to get into some of the specific challenges in WordPress as it relates to web performance. We're going to talk about and show how to use Chrome DevTools. We're going to also pivot to using something called WebPageTest. These are all tools that you have access to. And then if time remains, we're going to talk about something called performance budgets and really the future of WordPress performance. So let's just dive right into it. So you might be asking, what's the value of web performance? Well, it's all the things you see here, and I kind of stack rank these by date to show you that this concept of web performance is nothing new. And it relates to all the different areas of your WordPress website, including the very first one, which is conversion. And back in 2017, the company I worked for, Akamai, said that a simple 100 millisecond delay in website load time can kill your conversion rate by 7%. Google has come out a long time ago and said page speed is a ranking factor. You guys should probably be aware of that already. In terms of staying with things that Google has said, this back in 2010, they said 2 seconds is the threshold for e-commerce website acceptability. At Google, we aim for under a half second. We're going to be looking at how you can make your website faster to try to target that very, very quick load time. And when it comes to WordPress, Backlinko back in 2021 said the average WordPress website takes 3 seconds to load, which may not sound like a lot to you, but in the experience of using your website, it is an eternity. And then finally, in 2023, Skilled said that 47% of consumers expect a web page to load in 2 seconds or less, which kind of echoes what you saw Google say, right? Back in 2010. So all of this stuff is still relevant. All of it is absolutely relevant to your WordPress site. And WordPress is really kind of a double-edged sword. We've all used it because it is super user-friendly. It is easy to set up. It is highly customizable, which is really one of the biggest things that you have to love about WordPress, right? Is that vast ecosystem of themes and plugins that you can add to add functionality to your sites, and of course the strong community support and documentation. But a lot of times what happens is we spend our time focusing on site features, how our site looks, the content of our site, and we don't stop to think about, is this performant? Can someone actually access this information? And you really have to put yourself in your visitor's shoes and think about it from that perspective. And if your site loads slowly, unfortunately, no one's going to see your hard work. No one is going to buy your products because they don't stick around long enough to wait for your site to load. So what slows WordPress down? Well, there's a number of different things. The first one is what you would call unoptimized media, which usually takes the form of images, right? We all want these rich images on our site. So if they're super large, you're increasing the size of your site. And if you're not using modern formats, it makes it worse. Some of the JavaScript and CSS on a web page can block rendering or delay the rendering of the page. Excessive HTTP requests, when your website is parsed by a browser, it literally is making different requests. We're going to look at that today in what's called a waterfall chart. And you're going to be able to see how all those individual requests look. And if you make too many of them, you're going to slow down your website. Bloated themes, using unnecessary features and code. This is literally one of the reasons I moved to Kadence is because it's lightweight, it is responsive, and you're already getting a leg up in web performance by using Kadence. Another reason is poor hosting. Sometimes it's inadequate server resources. You just don't have the right hosting plan to match your traffic levels, or the servers that you've been provided by your host are simply not fast enough. And then you kind of heard this in the last presentation, plugin overuse, an excessive number of database queries coming from multiple plugins. We're going to kind of talk about that a little bit later too. So the thing you have to be thinking, and if you take nothing away from today's presentation, I want you to think about this. There is always a trade-off, and that trade-off is to balance feature richness of your website against the speed of your website. So we're going to give you some tools today to kind of let you see how you can do that. And the very first one is one you probably already have but don't know it. If you're using Chrome, which you probably are, it's the most popular browser in the world, inside Chrome is something called Developer Tools. And inside Developer Tools is something called Lighthouse. We're going to take a walk through that. And Lighthouse gives you the capability of auditing a website for performance, accessibility, SEO, and overall best practices. It is literally a tool that you don't need to install, you don't need to update. It is right there in Chrome. And I'm going to show you how to access that and use it. The weakness is that it's limited really kind of like to local testing, and your results can sometimes vary. And an important point to note when you're using this tool is that you must run it when you are logged out of WordPress and in what they call incognito mode, which is a browser mode. And the reason you want to do that is because you want to make sure that WordPress itself is not being judged by the tool. And incognito mode means that none of your Chrome plugins are actually going to be loaded, which could distort the times you're seeing in these numbers. And on the right, you kind of see a screenshot of this. So we're going to go through an example of that, but a couple terms that you may have already heard, but are really good to know as you use this tool is something called FCP, or First Contentful Paint. It's a fancy way of saying the time when the first text or image is painted on the screen by the web browser. It really affects your user's first impression of your page, and it's used kind of as a good indicator of the initial rendering speed of when something pops onto your page. The next one is the largest contentful paint, or LCP, and it's time when the largest element, which is often an image, becomes visible on your page. And again, it is also another key to perceived load speed. So I'm gonna now start a demo of Chrome DevTools, and I'm gonna come out of the presentation to do that so that you guys can see how this is actually used in real life. And what we're gonna be looking at is an out-of-the-box implementation of WordPress. So I actually built a little server here on Linode. You can browse to this, and it is a blank, plain vanilla WordPress installation. I'm going to go ahead and full screen this, or make it rather larger so that you can see it. And I'm going to take you over to this site. This is that same site you can see there. It's a welcome to WordPress. I'm running the latest version. You can see that there are no posts, there are no pages or anything like that. There are only the plugins that are installed by default. And I'm going to test this with Chrome DevTools. But remember what I said a moment ago. You have to do this in incognito mode. So I'm going to open a new window in incognito mode. Hopefully you guys can see this. Hannah, if you can be my eyes here and make sure that people can see this, that would be great. But I'm going to actually go back to that page, and we are going to look at the actual test server itself. So I'm going to grab the URL from here, and I'm going to minimize this and go back to my incognito. And again, hopefully you guys can see this. It looks like you can't. So I'm gonna try to share it again. Actually, you know what? We're gonna go back. I'm gonna take a break here, and we're just gonna do this without incognito mode to make it a little bit faster. So I'm gonna go in here, and I believe you guys can see this. I am going to log out of this screen, and you can see if I go back here, I'm going to take off all of the login information so that I'm just going to the main screen. And here I am going to, in my browser, click right here in the upper right-hand corner, and I am going to go down to More Tools, Developer Tools. And here you're going to see a bunch of things across the top, little tabs that I can go to. And if you've never seen this, looks a little intimidating and can be a little bit scary. But what you're looking for is the one called Lighthouse. And what I'm going to do here is accept all of these defaults. You don't have to know what these are for the purpose of today. We're going to have Lighthouse evaluate this website from a mobile, as it imitates a mobile device rather than a desktop. Whenever you're checking web performance, always check it from mobile, because mobile networks are much more capacity constrained than your desktop. At home, you might have a fiber connection and it's 1 gig down. Your iPhone is not the same speed. It does not have the same specs in terms of hardware, and it does not have the same connectivity. So if you test for mobile, you're guaranteed that your performance on desktop is going to be good. And then Lighthouse actually will generate a few categories here of performance. I'm just going to keep these all checked for now, and we're going to say analyze page load. And as you can see here, it has now kind of imitated a little mobile device. And here's the page coming up. You can see a thumbnail of it, and it's running this test. And again, look what's happening here, right? This is an out-of-the-box implementation. Now, it's probably taking into account some of my plugins because we're not in incognito mode, but there's a few things going on here, right? I'm seeing a performance score of 66, and that is really low. Your goal is to get to 100. And then it's calling things out in red that I should pay attention to. And the first one is, again, what we talked about a couple of slides back, which is the first contentful paint, which is at 4.3 seconds. And the largest contentful paint, which is at 6.5 seconds. And down here, you can actually see some more diagnostics of this tool. And it's telling you, if I open up this little slider over here, that what's causing the largest contentful paint to take 6,000 milliseconds or 6 seconds is this first image, right? So I might consider changing that image to be something else. And it's also telling me as another recommendation down here, I could properly size it. Now this is almost weird weirdly odd recommendation, because these are WebP images and they already are optimized for the web, but they could potentially be smaller than what they are. And then the images don't have explicit width or height tags to kind of let the browser know this is the size you need to draw the image on the page. So again, you're seeing things in kind of red, yellow, green, sort of traffic light protocol here. But what the idea is that out of the box, a brand new, fresh WordPress installation is already behind the 8-ball. It is already having problems. And again, we are just using a default theme and so forth. But what I want you to take away from this is you have to really think about this stuff, about web performance. And this is just one tool to use it. Now, this is not my preferred tool, but it is something that, again, if you're using Chrome, you already have this. So switching back over to the presentation for a moment, and we're going to go back to the slides, is we're going to look at a different tool now. And this is another free tool that you can get on the web, and it's called WebPageTest. And it is a fantastic performance analysis tool. It is free to use for up to 300 tests per month. After that, there's a fee for it. But you're getting these things called waterfall charts, which we're going to kind of show you in detail here in a moment. And it's really great for in-depth analysis of your page and your site, because it actually simulates real environments. And admittedly, like a lot of these tools, they can be a little bit complex for beginners, and you have to interpret some of the data. But what you're going to see is a really, really transparent way to look at your website. And what you're seeing here on the right is an example of a waterfall chart. And we're going to look at a few different pages to see how this looks. And the first one I'm going to look at is Wikipedia. The reason they call this a waterfall chart is because it literally looks like a waterfall. When you look at a web page and you do a view source, you get all the HTML code. Well, a browser literally goes from top to bottom, reading that file, and does the things as directed in that HTML file. The waterfall is a mirror of that. So when I load Wikipedia, for example, the first thing it's going to do is browse to the site. And you can see that it took 571 milliseconds to do that. Then it's going to load the main.css file for Wikipedia. And then after that takes 607 milliseconds. And then you can see it's loading a bunch of JPEGs and PNGs right down here. And you can see each of these loading in sequence. And that's exactly how a web page works. You may not have seen this before, but when your WordPress site loads, all of this is happening. And we're going to look at a few different sites in more detail here. The first one, again, is Wikipedia. I'm sure mostly everyone here on this call has used this. It's a very simple static site with really basic HTML and small image sizes. We are then going to look at a couple of WordPress sites. The first one is called SupportPay. I don't own these sites. They were chosen kind of at random. It is a WordPress site, and it is an e-commerce site. So we're going to look at what that looks like. And then we're going to look at something called Park Boulevard Dentistry, which is yet another WordPress site. And it's a very typical small business website. And we're going to look at how you would interpret these things, or how you would look at these by running web page tests. So let's go out again, and we're going to go over here to web page test. You can get to where I'm going by going to webpagetest.org. So if you want to follow along at home while I'm doing this, that would be great. Notice here that it automatically defaults me to mobile, right? And it's testing on an emulated Motorola G. And it's making this test from Virginia. I happen to be located in Atlanta. So I'm going to go and put in the website address, wikipedia.org, and I'm going to click Start Test. Now, it's a busy time of the day, so this may take a couple of seconds to run through. And if it does, I've already run it once before. But this is what you'll see as WebPageTest starts to begin its test. What it's doing in the background is emulating a Motorola G, and it is actually crawling your website. And then we're going to come back here and see what those results look like. I'm going to give it about another 5 seconds. And then we'll switch it up. You know, it's noon Eastern right now, so there's probably a few people that are using this, so it might take a little while. Oh, test is complete. There we go. All right. So the first thing you'll see here is a summary at the top. Is the site quick? And if you've been to Wikipedia, it's kind of mostly text, right? And it's kind of showing you what that is. Now, Wikipedia actually has a pop-up here, and you can see that that's what this thing is actually interpreting. I think it is anyway. Let's see. Yeah, no, it might be actually correct. So you can see that it's a quick, well, it's telling you not bad, it's usable, but it needs improvement. And then you see a whole bunch of these stats. Do not get intimidated by these stats. Okay, these are simply things you have to keep in mind about it. And notice that you'll see first contentful paint and largest contentful paint. And you'll see something else here to draw your attention to is page weight. Is your page has a weight. As if you could put your website on a scale, it would have a weight. And it's usually measured in kilobytes or megabytes. And you can see Wikipedia is pretty much straight text. So it's pretty lightweight. But that largest contentful paint is 9 seconds. So the next thing I want to draw your attention to is this nice film strip down here that kind of shows you what a user sees as they load your website. And in this case, you're seeing that it takes almost to 2.5 seconds before the first item is actually drawn on the page. And that is a long time, even for a site that has text. And you can see as I drag this timeline, more and more of the page slowly gets built and rendered. And you can see like little thumbnails of it. And if I scroll down here, I get my first waterfall. And if I click into this waterfall, I can see what the page is actually doing. I'm going to scroll down, make this perhaps a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. And you can see that it is doing exactly what I showed you in one of the slides, that it is loading the org. This time it took 854 milliseconds because it redirected me, wikipedia.org, to www, and it burned almost a second doing that. And then it actually then loaded the PNGs, SVGs, and JS files. So that's not the most interesting example. Going back over here to the slides, I want to full screen this. Just a couple things to kind of call out. Wikipedia is not a WordPress site, right? So it's not really a great example, but I wanted to show you something that is lightweight and you would think would have fantastic performance, but it still has those 8.25 seconds for that first contentful paint. And the time to first byte was really, really long. And this data is coming from a different run that I have linked in here that I ran against it. But we're gonna look at this and say, okay, this is a good start. And this is the baseline for what we're going to discuss next. So remember, the next site that we're gonna go look at is the support pay site. And that is right here, support pay. How do I know this is a WordPress site? Well, there's a very simple test. If you type in WP admin at the command line and you get a login prompt, it is pretty much guaranteed that you are looking at a WordPress site. There we go. So this is definitely a WordPress site. And what can you see here, right? Very good visual design. You've got a bunch of stuff loading here above the fold. You've got some carousels here. I've got some rotating images, scrolling images. I scroll down here and I've got some information about this. It appears to be an app, expenses, and very much the typical things you would put in with a builder, right? Like you would build your website, and I think this has a great design, right? It looks fantastic, and it has all these great images. It is beautiful to look at. It is a well-architected site. What happens when I run this through WebPageTest? And I've already done it. So in the interest of saving time, this is what it looks like. It takes 804 seconds to load the first page. This tells me something automatically. This is called time to first byte. This means that the very first page that I am loading is the server is taking a long time, almost a second, to generate this content. That's a good kind of baseline to remember, is that if it takes about a second, you probably don't have the best hosting plan that you could have. And then again, we have a ridiculously large contentful paint. And the two things I want to call out is look at the blocking time. There's a browser thread that draws things on the screen, and some of the code on this page blocked the rendering for up to 9 seconds. And then look at this one. page weight. Remember what Wikipedia was? What, 95K? This thing is almost 4 meg in size. And again, may not sound like a lot, but it is. And if you put your website on a scale, this is huge. You're sending all of this information over the wire. The more information you're sending in terms of page weight, that payload, the slower your page is going to render. Ideally, you should be targeting something here in the 1 meg range or below. And again, you've got this great film strip here. This is even more pronounced. Look how far I have to scroll until the first thing draws on the screen. 8 seconds. That is an eternity. But again, if you looked at this site solely through the lens of, is it great design? Yes. Is it functional? Yes. But if it takes 8 seconds for someone to see this, are they going to stick around or are they going to surf away? And then down here, we're going to go in and we're going to look at a waterfall chart. Now, this should look a lot different than what we saw at Wikipedia. Look how long this thing is, right? And we're going to go into this so you can actually see what it looks like in greater detail, and I'll zoom in. But look at all of the requests that this site is making, right? There, it's counting it. Actually, these are numerical right here. I have to scroll down and I can see that it is making 309 requests. And if I scroll back up to the top, a few things stand out to me. This X, number 1, is a render blocking resource. You can see the very first set of what is being loaded here in a CSS file is actually blocking page render. And again, what you're seeing in each of these lines, just to recap this, is if I'm loading this specific item, which in this case is a JS file, it took 213 milliseconds to do that. You can also see some other things going on here. Again, this is just kind of think of this as an X-ray of your site, right? What's going on here? There is a link here to an object, a JS object that does not exist. It's actually kicking out a 403 error, and the web browser is burning almost half a second waiting for this asset that will never arrive. And then down here, notice another thing. You have some stuff that is in yellow. These are from, you can kind of look at the name, from ad servers, right? So this site somewhere is, I have ads disabled, so you can't see it, but they are using ad servers. And each of these ad servers, look at these are 302 redirects. They're in yellow to call your attention to them, because the ad server is doing all this extra work and bloating my page load. And again, here we go, another 403 error right here down here. Something is not authenticating properly, and more ad servers. So, you know, you can kind of get the gist of this from looking at this waterfall chart. Another great thing about WebPageTest is I can go here and I can say performance summary or opportunities and experiments. I'll look at performance summary to start. And what it does is take you back to that first screen and show you these runs, and you're doing 3 different waterfalls. And the reason it does this is sometimes, you know, things can change. You might have a network traffic that interrupts the first waterfall. So it runs this 3 times to get a baseline, right? And understand what it's looking at. Another thing down here is it breaks down the requests in terms of like, how many requests am I making for HTML, for JavaScript, for CSS, for images, and then what's taking up the most bytes. And for most sites, it's going to look kind of like these pie charts, right? Where images are like 50% of your page load time. But another thing to call out here is in WebPageTest is opportunities and experiments. And this is where WebPageTest kind of gives you some ideas of what you might want to do. And you can see as I scroll down here, it's saying what I kind of showed you in the waterfall. 39 JavaScript files are blocking page rendering. And there are different ways that you can address this problem. And one is to defer those scripts to later. And you can actually run a little experiment to see if that improves page load time from this interface. If I scroll down here, 66 external files are blocking page rendering. we talk, and I'm just going to kind of scroll through that because we kind of already saw that. Here's that largest contentful paint. The image element driving your LCP, largest contentful paint, is a background image, right? So I might be able to improve that. How would I improve that? This is a PNG file. A PNG file can be changed out to be a WebP file, a different file format that preserves the integrity of the image, but is much more lightweight. And then another call out here, images outside the critical viewport. And the critical viewport you can think of as pretty much everything in this section, like above the line. What could be done here is that you can do what's called lazy loading of these images so that they aren't forced to render to show the page. They load as someone scrolls in. You guys have probably seen that on other sites. As you scroll down a page, images pop in. Here, everything's loading at once, which is actually delaying that first load time of the page. And then again, you got the metrics down here and so forth. So flip back over here to this. We'll go back to the slideshow for a second and just kind of recap, what we saw. The initial server response time is very slow, and I can look at this in the WebPageTest and see that they're using something called Encapsula, which is actually oddly it's a security device that confronts a website. So that might be the first thing I would look at changing is not trying to use Encapsula to host my website. And again, that blank screen I showed you in the film strip is shown for 6 seconds until something happens. So lazy load that, use a plugin. WordPress has it built in too, but this seems to not be using that capability. And again, you've got it's not a 404, but a 403 error, and we're burning time on that. I already mentioned using WebP images, instead of PNG. And there's a couple other things we didn't get to, but you could serve your fonts locally. It's reaching out to the web, to Google, to get those fonts. And then you can cache static assets on this site. Static assets are things that are just plain text files, CSS, JS, HTML, but you kind of smush those down and reduce the size. So hopefully that's a good example. We're going to look at another case study now called Support Pay. And this, not Support Pay, but Park Boulevard Dentistry. So a lot of you guys probably build these sites. This is a very, very typical community style WordPress site. And again, how do I know I'm looking at a WordPress site? I go to WP admin, and if I get the admin login page, then boom, I know I'm looking at a WordPress site. So what am I seeing on this page, right? Again, well designed, well intentioned, right? I've got a nice image here, hero image. I've got some, nice little interface options here. I've got these scrolling Google reviews. Again, all the things you want to see in a website, right? I've got, some office hours, cool, a picture of probably the main dentist, all of that. And then I've got, images down here about the treatments. I could go into any of these pages. These are, it's flippable cards, first impressions. Of course, I've got my Trustpilot or whatever, right? So by all intents and purposes, if you look at this through the typical design eye, I've got content, I've got a nice design, but are people actually going to be able to use this? And I already ran a WebPageTest against it, and you can see for yourself. Hopefully this is starting to become a little more familiar to you. You can see that, again, we have a problem with time to first byte, which is indicative that there might be a hosting problem. And then over here, I've got first contentful paint, again, 6 seconds. We're going to look at what might be causing that, with the largest contentful paint taking almost 7 seconds. Here, we get a little bit better. We're not blocking as much as the pay site was, Smart Pay was. We're blocking for about half the time, but we're still blocking. And then look at the page weight here, right? Remember, Wikipedia was what, 95 meg? This is pretty good from a page standpoint, right? You're right at that 1 meg area you should be. And then, so what's holding us back here? We're going to kind of go into that. And if I scroll over here, again, look at this page. This is what the user is experiencing. It's almost 6.4 seconds, again, on a mobile, before anything draws on the page, right? And I have to go all the way over here. So if I scroll down here, and I look at the waterfall. Look how different this waterfall looks like. It's not the condensed one we saw with Wikipedia, and it is not the giant 300-line one we saw, but it's a much more moderate waterfall chart. But you can kind of see some of the same things. So here's the very first request, and you can see that's where I'm getting this time to first byte number from. It took 848 milliseconds to get the server to just give me the HTML page. That is too long, right? And then notice I've got those X's here, and those are render blocking resources. Then notice here, I've got a redirect. Oh, sorry, this is the one using caps lock. Sorry about that. I was mixing up the two. But notice here that it took 618 milliseconds to redirect me from this URL to this URL. And I could change that by using different types of hosting. And then down here, again, we see another problem, right? There is some sort of JS file, migrate.min.404.js, probably from some upgrade that was done in the past, right? And it is burning almost a second looking for this file. So like if you do nothing else, you can look at a waterfall and see what 404 errors do I have, because you might think those are harmless, but you can see the harm it is causing here. And then, you know, a few things here again, I'm loading, it's loading a bunch of stuff from Google. You can see those requests here because they're going to a different domain and not Park Boulevard Dentist. But look, we're only at like 49-ish requests. And then it's not terrible. But let's see what WebPageTest says about what we could do here, right? So there are some opportunities here, and you can see it has a reasonably quick first byte time. I would still say that needs improvement. One JavaScript file is blocking page rendering. If I scroll down here, still largest contentful pain is high. And again, it tells you actually what is causing that. It's this block of text. And then again, we have a problem with lazy loading images. These are actually coming from Google, so probably less of a problem. But there are some that could be lazy loaded. You're kind of seeing that here. And then a kind of a different problem, right? There are several fonts that are being used here that hide text while they're loading. So you might want to think about using a different font. And it's actually calling out that some of the fonts are hosted on third parties rather than hosting them locally. If you bring them locally, it's much faster. And so forth. So, and then you can see some other things here, like 31 static files have inadequate cache settings. That's an easy fix on the server side. And then you've got some redirects. I kind of mentioned that earlier. So again, kind of flipping back over here to this. Oops, sorry, wrong button. We're going to go back over here. Keeping an eye on the clock. I know we're getting almost time to the Q&A part of this. You know, Park Dentist, again, server response time. Actually, I looked at the wrong one of these. This was support pay. I want to go back to support pay because I think we've actually already covered this. But you know, going back to support pay, I want to make sure I cover this slide. Sorry, it's out of order. Bad presenter. But again, that enormous payload size, nothing renders until 8 seconds. There are actually 66 externally referenced CSS files that are blocking page load. And the most major issue here with this site is that all the URLs are loading from a WP Engine temp domain. So if you look at the URLs and we can go back to this in the waterfall chart, you can see that they're loading from the wrong place and they should be loading from a different URL. That's causing a problem. And again, think of WebPageTest as this X-ray for your website, right? So again, same things we've already called out, images loading at once, cached assets, and so forth. So that's kind of WebPageTest in itself. And I'm trying to close this out in the next 5 minutes so that we have some time for Q&A, because this is an immensely important topic, and I want to make sure we got time for any questions you guys might have. The next thing that I want to talk about is something called a performance budget. And this might not be as well known. And much like you set up a spending budget for your house, it's often a good thing to set a performance budget for your website. What does that mean? Well, a performance budget is some sort of baseline metric that you can set for your website and test against it. So you set a metric on things that would affect site performance, like my page weight is never going to be above 1.5 meg. or my load time is going to be X number of seconds, or I want 50 HTTP requests, not 300. So a performance budget is kind of thinking about what you would set for a budget, and then when you make changes to your site, you evaluate by using WebPageTest, for example, you evaluate your site against that budget. And what does this do? This helps you prevent performance regressions. Let's say you add a new plugin. You're like, cool, I can add the Trustpilot logo onto my site. And then you run WebPageTest and you're like, holy crap, that added another 1.5 or 2 seconds to page load. I might think twice about using that plugin or do it a different way. And then if you have a performance budget, it can really help guide your decision-making as you add new site features, right? Because you want to be thinking about performance all the time. And then it can actually help you really prioritize your optimization efforts. And again, the types of performance budgets you might use are really kind of these three. It's milestone. You're like, what's the time to interactive? What's the time to first byte? How big do I want that payload of my page size to be? Or, here's the lighthouse score, right? Like what lighthouse score should I be targeting? Like a minimum of, let's say, 85 and I'm at 88, that kind of thing. So that's sort of what performance budgets are. There is a great little tool at www.performancebudget.io. I don't have any connection to the site. I just happen to know it exists. That can really help you, right? You can set your targets. You can use WebPageTest to get this data to pull in here, and you can kind of set that budget. And even it actually integrates with Lighthouse, so it can actually test your site against the budgets that you set. And here, I'm setting some slider bars here with budgets for, the size of my HTML, the size of my CSS, right? And again, this is one of those budgets, again, that's based on quantity, right? In this case, this one's based on page load, right? I've got a budget of 600 KB. That's very aggressive. Like I want to be, under a megabyte. Am I staying under that is what this tool will help you do. And then finally, we're going to talk about the future of web performance. This is super important too. AI is spreading like peanut butter all over everything these days, and performance optimization for websites is no different. What I expect to see in the coming years is things that are baked into WordPress, such as predictive loading based on user behavior. An AI tool would figure out what typical paths users take through a site and predictively load pages based on that. Automated image and code optimization during the creation of a page. You can do some of that now with plugins. It's not necessarily a far future thing. And then, where I'm looking through WebPageTest and sort of doing the detective work by myself, I think you'll start to see AI-assisted identification of performance bottlenecks, which will help you in terms of identifying and fixing them, because you don't have to have the expert knowledge to do it. And then finally, there's something kind of cool that I thought Cloudflare was doing. Again, Cloudflare is similar to Akamai, what they call a CDN or content delivery network. They have this new thing called SpeedBrain. And it is an AI-powered tool that looks to optimize network performance of a website. And it kind of tries to predict and improve the routing decisions that are made to get people to your website in real time, using real-time data. So there isn't a person sitting in the background doing this, but there's an algorithm doing it that is using AI to figure out how to do routing decisions. So we'll close this out and then leave some time for Q&A. How do you keep things fast? Well, the very first thing is choose a lightweight theme. And you are at a Kadence event, so you are already ahead of the game, right? You want a theme that is ridiculously lightweight to give you that unfair advantage of having a fast website, and it gives you that room to breathe, right? If you use a lightweight theme, then maybe I can layer on some plugins and I'm still going to stay under that 1 meg page size. Or I'm going to still, keep my time to first byte, my largest contentful paint low. You always want to opt for a minimalistic site design. It is such a truism that less is more. And because I showed you earlier, like most sites are composed of images, right? You have to think about How can I make those images optimized? How can less be more? Well, one of the ways you do that is making sure you're using the right image formats. And ideally, the ideal website to Jeff's brain is one that is useful, is fast, and is intuitive. And you heard the next bullet, the next section from the last presenter, minimize plugin usage. If you're hearing this twice in the span of 2 hours, it's probably kind of important. One of the things you should regularly do is audit and remove any unnecessary plugins that you are not using. It again is going back to that slide I had earlier of the advantages of WordPress is you've got this rich ecosystem, and I can just download a plugin. I get this functionality. I don't have to write code. I don't have to pay someone to write code. It is there, but those have a cost. And also in the spirit of minimizing plugin usage, you should look for multi-purpose plugins that do multiple things well, instead of having 3 plugins that do this, all the things that the multi-purpose plugin does. Because by having one, you're reducing that overall plugin count. So wherever you can, look for those multi-purpose plugins. Finally, regularly test. Like today might be brand new to all of you, right? You may have never seen WebPageTest before. Go to the site, bookmark it. Make performance testing a habit of something that you regularly do, especially after you add a new plugin or you make some kind of major site change. Also know that any third-party software that you use can sometimes cause big problems with page load time. So that's where I stop today. Hopefully we still have some time for Q&A. If you take anything away from this, remember that phrase I had earlier about the trade-off between web functionality and web performance. If you want to go do something today and implement a quick win, go into WordPress, go into your plugins and audit them. Look for something you're not using and disable it. Conduct a performance audit. Go use WebPageTest, right? Also, I have a website, costatechnologies.com, that I unfortunately did not link in here, silly me, but you see the domain name. I write a ton on this topic, and I have a lot of blog posts that can help you, skill up and learn better. Also, if you want to talk about website performance, happy to book a 30-minute review with you. My contact information is below. I post on Twitter quite a bit, or you can call me. Happy to do a personalized optimization plan for you. It is something I'm absolutely passionate about and love doing. So that is my presentation. So I am going to stop that. And Hannah, if you're there, you can stop.
I'm here.
We'll just do Q&A from here on out.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was amazing. Such an important topic, and one that I feel like when people build websites, it's not what's in their head. Like, it's not what they're thinking about until someone's like, hey, your site takes 20 seconds to load. They're like, oh, I should probably do something about that. So
yeah, performance is always an afterthought, right? Like
it is.
And really I'm trying to make sure it's kind of like top brain, right? Top of mind.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you. Before we do have some questions, some people are having a hard time seeing your screen, so it's a little bit blurry. Do you happen to have slides that you could share, or maybe people just should contact you if they have questions about some of the slides that you were showing?
I'll actually share. I'll share the slide deck out. Are you guys sending out any kind of recap, Hannah? I think you guys are, right?
Yeah, we definitely are. It'll be like everything will be replayed on YouTube. But if you actually want to just jump into the comments after this, because it's just going to keep on going, you could leave a link to your slide decks in the comments. That would be awesome for the people.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I just grab the slide. I'll put it into the chat for anybody who's there, but I'll put it in the comments too in the live stream. So you guys can go through that. You can go through that slide deck. Sorry if it was hard to see.
Oh, no, not your fault. Appreciate that. That would be so helpful. Okay, a couple questions from Fluent Community. He said, do you prefer to always use CDNs like Cloud F when you are focused on a local market, in parentheses, no international visitors, to mitigate some risks, in parentheses, DDoS, or you don't use it for small local websites?
Great question. The common sense wisdom of a CDN is if your audience is distributed, it is best to use a CDN, meaning if it's not local. You've got customers like in California, but your server's in Atlanta. definitely the use case for a CDN. That being said, I come from the CDN background, and there is always a benefit to it. You might see a more modest impact of that, but Cloudflare is free, and it is a very simple way to improve website performance and get a little bit back. If you think about that performance budget I mentioned earlier, Cloudflare gives you more room in that budget, and it gives you that extra space where you could play around with by, doing something, by adding more plugins. It gives you more breathing room. So the strict guidance is use it when your audience is distributed and not local, but I would still recommend it even for local. And if nothing else, you can turn it on and turn it off again with no harm, and you can see what the impact actually is.
Cool. That's great. They also want to know what local cache solution do you suggest and why?
Yeah, so there are a ton of plugins for this. I tend to favor, of course, I don't have it up right at the moment, but I can pull it up. There's a cache solution that I use that actually ties to Cloudflare. And I can jump into my own site here and tell you exactly what it is. Give me a second, and I'll tell you what the plugin is. Active. Where is it? Super Page Cache. If you actually look at Super Page Cache, it actually ties. You can tie it back to a CDN world, and it has a local cache. You have a really great span of control over it, and that's the one I use a lot. I find it to be just a well done plugin. There's a universe of them out there, but that's the one I tend to use.
Cool. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Someone else had asked about recommended performance optimization plugins. Do you have a different answer for that? That's from Greg in the chat.
Yeah, I don't really have a great answer there. I tried. There are some, like every time you add a plugin, again, there are some that are better than others. I don't really have my own recommendation there. I tend to use external tools to test rather than plugins. But I think you're asking more about performance plugins, but I don't really have a preference there. Sorry, Greg.
Sure. No worries. This one's from Steven. He wants to know, what's the difference in metric/grades from tests like Lighthouse, WebPageTest, GTmetrix, etc., or just pick one and stick with it?
Yeah, if the problem with all of these tools is they're all going to give you like slightly different results, and that is almost something you have to deal with, is because they all do things a little bit differently. They might test at different times of the day when there's more network congestion. I would just try to use one. GTmetrix is a great choice. The nice thing about GTmetrix is it does give you some actionable things you can do, and it parses out, some of these what can be, intimidating topics if you're not familiar with it, or you don't know the vocabulary as well. And it can give you some more things to do. But I would find one tool that you like and get comfortable with it. Like I've used WebPageTest for years, so it's my go-to tool. But then again, there's a bunch of different things out there. Don't love Lighthouse. Like it only tests locally, and it always feels like a little kind of biased to me. But it does work. So again, and it's free. You already have it, so that's a plus as well.
Yeah, cool. That's great. Okay, last question. Also Fluent community. He said, is it good to compare sites that use cache and CDN versus sites that don't use it and see the real hosting page speed?
Yeah. So the beauty of a CDN is that it makes your site feel faster to the end user, but it does also it can mask potential problems, right?
Sure.
So like if you really want to be strict about this and rigorous about it, you want to test your site with CDN on and CDN off, so that you can actually see what the differences are. Again, obviously I'm pro CDN, but like you definitely want to look at this from the lowest common denominator. Think someone sitting on an iPhone 12, right, with a 4G connection, trying to buy a product from you, trying to book an appointment at your dentistry website or get your operating hours, right? If it takes them forever to load that page, you're just making them mad, and they're going to do something else. They're going to surf away. So always test with the lowest common denominator that you possibly can.
Cool. Great. Thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share this knowledge. And guys, I'll jump into the YouTube live stream and put the link back in there for anyone who missed it. And really appreciate the time you guys spent today. I know there's a lot of things you could be doing with an hour of your time. Hopefully I made you a little bit smarter on the importance of web page performance and how you can improve it.
Yeah, you definitely did. Thanks so much. I appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks, guys.